Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 30th of October, almost at the month's end, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, whether that's coming from the National Weather Service in Juneau, the National Weather Service office in Anchorage or Fairbanks, the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, or the National Tsunami Warning Center. Again, a lot of information is always available just a couple clicks away at weather.gov/Alaska or over the Alaska Weather Information Line, 1-800-472-0391. And by now you probably know the code to get the forecast in St. Lawrence Island, just like I do. David.Snider@NOAA.gov is the easy way to find me. If you have questions, you want to share a picture, or just tell me about the weather in your part of Alaska, I would love to hear it. So please use your email. Look what I found today. Just hunting around, taking a look at your favorite FAA aviation weather cameras. You get 3 guesses what this is. You are looking at tail feathers. Large bird sitting on a camera, just scavenging around because it's wintertime and hanging out. No, it's not a dumpster chicken. It's our nation's greatest symbol, the American bald eagle, right? Beautiful thing out there. And we're looking at its rump, of course. This is Sisters Island, the northeast view, but maybe the eagle wasn't just perched there for the fun of it. Maybe a few moments prior there was a rainbow there that it was checking out. Sisters Island, the northeast view, normally looks like this without a bunch of tail feathers in the way. So that indeed is how things looked across northern parts of southeast and the inside passages earlier today. And clouds moving in there as another wave of weather was working in across the northern panhandle. In about 2 days' time, this could look considerably different. There may be snow falling in this picture. We'll have to remember to come back and take a look at that. So eagle, rainbow, you pick, either one of them. Not a bad way to start. Here's the way it looks at northwestern parts of Alaska this afternoon. Hazardous weather. We have winter weather advisory up across the Chukchi coast and a winter storm warning across the areas in the western parts of the Brooks Range from Point Lay and west. Now the, northwest of Noatak, I should say. Point Lay and west would be this way. As you look up north, about 4 inches of snow possible in this region through tomorrow night, Halloween, at 10 o'clock. We're looking at gusts that could blow into this region at about 55 miles per hour. So we got a lot of wind coming up your way, and it does look like there will be an opportunity of snow. When you put those two things together, you start kind of pushing the line for blizzard conditions. We're not there yet, but it looks like we are going to have a reduction in visibility here. It could be down to about a half mile, maybe less at times. But 4 inches of snow and gusts to 55 miles per hour is going to get your attention, and welcome back to winter there across the northwest coast. Winter storm warning, though, is for areas generally northwest of Noatak. 7 to 12 inches of snow possible in this area. That's going to go also to about 10 o'clock tomorrow night, Halloween night. 7 to 12 inches of snow, not as much wind here. So you are going to see a decent amount of snow to get in your way and maybe slow you down a little bit, but at least you won't have as much wind as what we're talking about up on the northwest coast. So winter's coming back to the northwest there, and quickly. Here's a look at the satellite picture that we saw this afternoon. You can see one wave working its way through southeastern Alaska, a very weak area here of low pressure, just enough to move the clouds in, but still enough dry air that we can sneak out a rainbow there from the Sisters Island camera. Across the northern Gulf, southwestern Alaska, a lot of dry air is still in place here as high pressure is working its way in across the interior, southwest, and now the northern Gulf in the wake of low pressure that brought more than a foot of snow across some parts of the higher terrain around the Anchorage area. So hopefully you got some of that if you wanted it. Hopefully you got none of it if you didn't. Up across the north, high pressure still in charge of the interior and west, but low pressure is working in from the west and southwest up toward the northwest coast. And this is going to start up that southwesterly flow that is really going to start working in some more warmth and moisture into the northwest coast. That's what's bringing the snow to the western parts of the Brooks Range again. And for areas northwest of Noatak, maybe as much as a foot. 7 to 12 inches of snow there possible as we get into the next couple of days. Now, as we look out to the west, low pressure sitting across the western Bering at 996 millibars there will bring in some snow to far eastern Russia. High pressure's worked its way out into the southern Bering Sea at 1,016 millibars. That weak area of low pressure sitting across Norton Sound now is not a whole lot to get excited about, but it is trapping some areas of low-level moisture here across the lower Yukon River, maybe as far north as the lower AKwx River, and then some areas of light snow as you head up the Yukon River. High pressure sitting across the eastern Beaufort seacoast now. One thing that has done is lay down the seas and calm the winds. And this time of the year, the only thing that happens because of that is a very quick flash freeze of ice across most of the Beaufort Sea. As we'll see in the sea ice picture in the analysis here in just a little bit, pretty much the Beaufort Sea is covered up at this point, and the ice is still spreading westward into the Chukchi. But we have another weather maker trying to work its way up into the Chukchi here in just a matter of a day or so. That's probably going to limit the growth that we see across the Chukchi as we get into the next 24 to 36 hours. So don't get your hopes up on a big freeze up in the Chukchi just yet. But one good thing, if you are waiting for that ice very quickly, is that sea surface temperatures are coming down in the Chukchi now. And again, things are freezing up in the Beaufort. So changes are coming. Low pressure south and west of Haida Gwaii, that's sitting at 1,007 millibars. That's dragging in a lot of this dry air across the Gulf. We're going to see a very quick return, though, in moisture as we head into Wednesday night and Thursday across southeast. One weak wave is moving through tonight, and again, that's bringing the rain showers we saw around Sister Island and the Rainbow and the Eagle. And out across the west, our building fetch of west and southwesterly flows working its way up through the Bering Strait. Right now, it looks like we'll see a better chance for some light snow across west and southwestern Alaska and into the Kotzebue Sound region. This is that winter storm that we see moving its way northward, as that'll probably increase as we get into tonight and tomorrow. But look at the warmth that's still holding on across the western Bering and the St. Lawrence Island area, all the way down to the western tip of the YK Delta. There's still plenty of warmth out there if we're making that kind of weather. High pressure sitting across the interior. We're noticing some minor air quality reductions around the North Pole area. You've probably seen the alerts for that already. As we get into Wednesday, that colder air is quickly filling in across the northwest coast, and snow may be a pretty decent result of that, and maybe heavy snow at times, especially northwest of Noatak, where you could see as much as a foot. Again, a winter storm warning there until 10 o'clock Halloween. For generally some decent periods of snow northwest of Noatak and the western Brooks Range, but across the Chukchi Coast, you can see how the bands of pressure here, the isobars, the black lines we're showing on the map, see how those tighten up right there across the northwest coast? That's going to help to initiate a lot of wind flowing in from the southwest across the northwest coast with gusts to 55 miles per hour and maybe as much as 4 inches of snow there. Now out across the western Bering Sea, periods of rain and snow mixed in. Better chance you'll see rain showers around St. Matthew and low pressure down to 980 millibars just south of the western chain as we get into Wednesday afternoon. Now the Pacific is still pretty active. The jet stream though is limiting a lot of the northern extent of these weather makers, but they are trying to lift their way back north. But high pressures push them southward. A lot of this cold, dry, high pressure is limiting that northern extent of the storm track at this point. So we've got warm and wet air working its way up toward Haida Gwaii again, and generally dry conditions expected around many parts of southeast as we get into Wednesday. But watch what happens. That low quickly lifts northward by Thursday. A 989 millibar low at the front quickly moving across southern southeast. That traps cold air across northern southeast. Moisture is in place. Cold air is moving in. That's a recipe for snow across many parts of the northern sections of southeast. We may see some mixing around the capital city and just south. There might be some snow in Juneau, but there's a better chance some of that's going to be out toward the coast and northward toward Haines and Skagway and out toward Gustavus and certainly the higher terrain. So keep your eye on the weather in Juneau, but there certainly could be some snow in the area, and watch the forecast there as that develops from the National Weather Service in Juneau. Low pressure is down to 988 millibars, so it's going to get a little windy out there. But drier conditions continue for most of the interior, most of the west and southwest as we go into Thursday, including Kodiak Island. Here's a quick check of temperatures as we get into Wednesday morning. 30s and 40s for southeast, south central, teens and 20s. The interior, it's going to get cold and dry and clear conditions there. 14 below in Arctic Village. Single-digit temps, maybe just above that, maybe just below that around Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. Teens and 20s for Kotzebue Sound, 20s for Norton Sound, 20s and 30s for Southwest and Bristol Bay, 32 in Kodiak. For Wednesday afternoon, mid to upper 40s. Not a bad day in southeast, actually. Lower to mid 30s for South Central, 45 in Kodiak, 20 in Fairbanks, 5 below for Arctic Village. Single digits for the Beaufort Seacoast, 30s and 40s for Point Hope and Point Lay. Wainwright, 21. Low to mid 30s for Norton Sound, 39 in Nome, 39 in Shish, and 41 around Savunga. And southwest, looking at temps just above freezing.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to aviation now, IFR conditions are fairly widespread across the northern and western bearing from Kiska to Attu and all the way north towards St. Lawrence Island and Yukon Delta, moving inland across the upper end of the Norton Sound region. MVFR conditions should be fairly widespread across the eastern Gulf and most of southeastern Alaska, and the next wave that's working in from the North Pacific will also start to bring IFR closer to Nikolsky and Unalaska and Dutch Harbor as you head out across the North Pacific. Now that's going to spread a little bit more to the north and west as we get into Wednesday afternoon as that wraparound moisture is working in across the zone of low pressure that's lifting north. Across the Gulf, you'll see more VFR conditions spreading southward toward Kodiak Island, Kenai Peninsula, and many parts of southeastern Alaska by Wednesday afternoon. The central and eastern interior and most of the Beaufort Seacoast should be pretty good as high pressure will be large and in charge. IFR conditions sitting across the Chukchi Sea all the way across the northern Bering as well, and MVFR fairly widespread across the Yukon and the Kuskokwim deltas as well as most of Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. Some of that will diminish a little bit as we get into Thursday morning. Look for high pressure to clear things out a little bit more. IFR fairly widespread across the Chukchi Coast, Kotzebue, and northern parts of Norton Sound, the Seward Peninsula included there, all the way out towards St. Matthew. Southeast still looking pretty good, except for the southern end there, maybe around Ketchikan, Craig, and Klawock and Net. And out toward Kodiak Island, you'll see MVFR kind of trailing there. IFR is breaking up a little bit around that circulation just south and east of Atka and southwest of Nikolsky. Then MVFR will be fairly widespread across the Bering. No big change there as we get through Thursday afternoon. IFR lingers across southern parts of southeast, lifting northward a little bit more toward Petersburg and Heidelberg, of course, still covered up. IFR conditions across the Chukchi and Kotzebue Sound all the way through the Bering Strait, but not quite to St. Lawrence Island for Thursday afternoon. Most of the interior, southwest, south central looking pretty good there with VFR prevailing. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see VFR. You'll see the effects of high pressure not quite punching through all the way to Lake Clark and Merrill Pass. The western sides of that look to be a little more sketchy than the eastern sides, of course. Rainy Pass holding at MVFR, but from there on out, everything seems to be pretty good. VFR and generally smooth sailing for Isabel Pass, Mentesta Pass, Tanita Pass looking good at VFR. Portage Pass, we expect to see VFR throughout the day. Chilkoot and White Pass also looking for VFR conditions as we go through your Wednesday. Freezing levels have come down quite a bit with high pressure and cold across most of the interior and the north and west. We're seeing that warmer air push further and further south. It's pretty appropriate for this time of the year. Surface freezing line just about at the capital city, and you can see just above that levels between 2,000 to 4,000 feet and then stretching up to 10,000 feet south of Haida Gwaii. And as you get out towards St. Lawrence Island, levels there just nosing up on the 2,000-foot freezing line. Also across most of the southwestern capes and coastlines, levels there at or maybe just above 2,000 feet for most of the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern chain. Icing potentials around. We've got a lot of moisture still lingering in the region, and because of that, levels will hold around 8,000 to 2,000 feet, probably at its lowest level. There's going to be some places up north that may have even lower levels than this, so if you're flying around in Northwest, you might want to check that again first thing in the morning. Levels there will probably be more likely to be lower north of the Brooks Range, but isolated moderate icing is certainly a potential there. Across the Alaska Peninsula, generally on the Pacific side, and then out toward Adak and Atka, as well as Nikolsky, you'll be looking at levels at or above 4,000 feet. And any eastward movement into western Canada should be a little bit more of a concern with more moisture there. Here's a jet stream, low pressure, a pretty decent trough across the Bering and the North Pacific there. The fastest part of the jet stream's on the south side with that 100 to 160 knots across the northern Pacific. And then it takes a quick turn northward. Well, that should be 50 knots, not 5. That would be a really slow jet stream. 110 knots coming in across the Gulf of Alaska, and then bending into the Pacific Northwest and southeastern Alaska. So we're getting a lot of our moisture on the southern stream, but we're moving a lot of that colder air across and clearing things out for most of the mainland with that western part of the jet. Below that, 9,000 feet, the ridge of high pressure certainly in charge there, sitting across south central. Wind speeds fairly light, but strongest north of the Alaska Range, 10 to 20 knots, and across the Bering Strait, anywhere from 30 to 50 knots coming in from the west and southwest. You can see high pressure is a little bit further east at 3,000 feet here, a general east to westerly flow across the northern Gulf. South and southwesterlies coming up the west coast and in through the Bering Strait, 25 to as strong as 50 knots just off the shore of the Chukchi. And you can see that westerly flow again working across the interior. Turbulence potential generally along the Chukchi coast below 4,000 feet, also across the Alaska Peninsula to the eastern chain, with considerable moderate the most likely threat.
Just as the sun is part of weather on Earth, it also affects weather in space. The sun creates solar wind by steadily releasing a flow of plasma particles in all directions around it. Sometimes the sun gives off a flash of light and X-rays. This is known as a solar flare. When massive bursts of particles explode into space, we call it a coronal mass ejection, or CME. When a CME is directed toward Earth, it hits the magnetosphere, the magnetic field around our planet that protects us. If the storm is large, we may even get to enjoy a light display in the sky called the auroras. In space, satellites may be damaged, and astronauts should take cover. On Earth, people do not feel any physical effects. We may lose electricity in some areas, polar flights may be rerouted, and satellite services may be disrupted. While these situations aren't ideal, they are rare and fixable. This is why we will continue to study the sun and its interactions with Earth and the solar system.
Longing for more space, open skies, and exotic travel? Then look up, about 30 to 600 miles straight up at the ionosphere, Earth's interface to space. Nestled far above the clouds but below outer space, this little understood destination invites you to explore its many features. Experience both the weather from Earth and the weather from space. Marvel at the ballet of radio waves and navigation signals, like GPS, leaping through this particle paradise. Sit back, relax, and take in the aurora, some satellites, and the International Space Station as they sail by. And you'll want your camera handy for one of the region's signature features, bright and colorful air glow. This daily show is made possible by the ionosphere's own swirling charged particles, because that's what the ionosphere is. It's all charged particles. During the day, enjoy the sea of particles, freshly energized by the sun. As the sun sets, this particle party relaxes and the air glow thins. Our quieter nightlife lets you gaze into clearer skies. The ionosphere is in constant motion, an amazing effect of space weather. Don't miss when solar storms rain down. The storm separates the particles even more, making this colorful region delightfully more dense in some places and stunningly sparse in others. And don't forget about storms from Earth below. Your weather from back home also stirs up this one-of-a-kind destination. Experience the unique beauty of every season, as changes in Earth's atmosphere, daily and annually, can create pressure waves, changing the ionosphere's shape and density. Venture to the equator, where our particles are packed in lush and thick. Cruise along a magnetic field line and see how the ionosphere's charged material also interacts with Earth's own magnetic field. Don't miss the superhighway of particles zipping out to space and back down to the planet. This unpredictable parade of charged particles can help you unplug and unwind. This is because the crowd of particles can garble the radio and satellite communications from home. The ionosphere welcomes you to discover more about this little-known region. After all, once you've explored this interface to space, who knows how much farther you'll be able to go.
When a star, bigger and more massive than the Sun, runs out of fuel at the end of its life, its core collapses while the outer layers are blown off in a supernova explosion. What's left behind depends on the star's original mass. A star roughly 10 to 20 times our Sun leaves behind a neutron star. A more massive star becomes a black hole. Unlike black holes, neutron stars are directly observable, usually as pulsars, the lighthouses of the cosmos. Discovered 50 years ago, they are the densest observable objects in the universe. Neutron stars compress up to twice the Sun's mass into a city-sized sphere. Matter is packed so tightly that a teaspoon of neutron star interior would weigh more than 1 billion tons on Earth. Still, the nature of the ultra-dense matter in the cores of neutron stars is unknown. Because neutron stars pack so much mass into such a tiny volume, they produce gravity strong enough to bend the light they emit, distorting their appearance in a way that enables the mass and size of the star to be measured. Scientists cannot reproduce the extreme conditions in and around neutron stars on Earth. They must look into the galaxy to answer decades-old questions about extreme matter and gravity. NASA's Neutron Star Interior Composition Explorer mission, or NISA, will make X-ray observations of neutron stars from its perch on the International Space Station. It will give astronomers more insight into these mysterious objects, helping determine what is under their surface. A multi-purpose mission, NISA includes a technology demonstration called Sextant. It will analyze NISA's observations to validate the use of rapidly rotating neutron stars as navigation beacons for travel in deep space throughout the solar system and beyond.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And now time for a quick look at your sea ice update for this October 30th. Again, the Beaufort Sea is pretty much filled in now with a solid ice pack. Concentrations are still a little bit on the fringe north of Utqiagvik and to the west if you extend north of the northwest coast. Along the Chukchi coast, though, not the case. So you'll notice a lot of open water there, some marginal ice trying to sneak its way west of Wainwright along some of the shoals there. But sea surface temperatures are still on the warmer side, but they are coming down. The other thing, though, that's going to mitigate any rapid expansion of ice into the Chukchi is a strengthening storm that's moving in from the south. It will bring some hefty southwest winds, and with that, we wouldn't expect to see a whole lot of ice growing very quickly thanks to that warm and stronger wind. Now, protected areas, we are seeing some ice forming there along the barrier islands close to Shishmaref and the upper end of Kotzebue Sound along Kotzebue itself, and south and west of Point Lay all the way up toward Wainwright. So don't be surprised if you're in a protected area to see some pretty quick growth in the coming days there. Easy for me to say. Let's take a look at southeast. We're going to have some changing weather in the next couple days. Look for northerlies tomorrow, 15 to 20 knots, 3 to 4 foot seas there, northwesterlies in Clarence Strait, down through Ketchikan and Metlakatla, about 3 foot seas expected there. Northwesterlies for most of the outer coast, about 15 knots with 7 foot seas for most areas. Yakutat will start to see a stronger northeasterly flow develop on Thursday in response to low pressure moving in across the eastern Gulf. This could also bring in some rain and snow to parts of southeast. Snow would be primarily focused on the northern areas if we have it. And gusts to 45 knots coming out of Lynn Canal, 6 foot seas there, 5 to 6 foot seas further south. And 35 knots or so south of Sitka with stronger gusts coming out of the Dixon entrance up to 45 knots. With a 14-foot sea on Thursday. For South Central, generally light winds on Wednesday inside of Prince William Sound, 15 knots and 2-foot seas. 3 to 5-foot seas across Cook Inlet. You're looking at 15 to 20 knots there. North and westerlies outside of Resurrection Bay, about 3 to 4-foot seas expected on Wednesday. With low pressure across the east, we're looking at 15 to 20 knots for most areas in the Gulf. 3-foot seas inside of Prince William Sound, 3 to 5-foot seas across Cook Inlet, and again 15 to 20 knots for most areas there for Thursday. For Bristol Bay, an easterly flow moving across the region, 3-foot seas expected there, 6-foot seas down the Bering Sea coast. Healthy easterly flow feeding into and around low pressure just to your south. 30 to 35 knots there with 8 to 14-foot seas, with seas building as you head out toward Unalaska and Nikolsky. Across Kodiak Island, northeasterly winds on either side, 4 to 5-foot seas are on that 20-knot wind for Wednesday. Winds come up a little bit more as we get into Thursday, 25 knots inside of Shelikof Strait with an 8-foot sea, 4-foot seas for Bristol Bay on a 25-knot wind. Easterlies continue as you head down the Bering Sea coast, and east and southeasterly winds a little bit stronger as well down the Pacific coast of the Alaska Peninsula through Chignik, Perryville, and down toward Sand Point, where you have a 14-foot sea there on Thursday. For the Aleutians, an east and southeasterly flow rounding high pressure that's in charge of really most of the Bering Sea at this point. 6 to 8-foot sea is expected there for Wednesday for central and eastern parts of the islands. East and northeasterly winds coming in. Remember, low pressures down here to the south and east, so we get about 10 to 16-foot seas on the Pacific coast. The higher seas again, anywhere from about the Shumagins out toward Unalaska and Nikolsky, and 9-foot seas there on the Bering Sea coast. As we get into Thursday, a slight improvement there, 20 to 35 knots in some cases, but seas as high as 7 to 9 feet, maybe 10 feet south of Nikolsky to Unalaska. And then we're getting back into that northerly wind as you get out toward Kiska and Shemya with 7 to 10-foot seas there on Thursday. For the west coast, south and easterly winds developing there across the Kuskokwim Delta. The strongest will be here from the Kuskokwim all the way out towards St. Matthew, 20 to 25. 5 to 6-foot seas there, maybe even 8-foot seas around St. Matthew. And then southerlies working their way up through Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island, 20 knots with 4 to 7-foot seas. Now, as that easterly flow is strengthening, that southerly flow is going to weaken a little bit more. The stronger winds will be up a little bit further north, as you'll see in a moment. Look for 25 to 30-knot winds, 8 to 12-foot seas, the highest of which will be around St. Paul and St. George. Norton Sound looking at southeasterlies, 10 knots and 3-foot seas for Thursday. Across the north now, easterlies continue across the Beaufort Sea, 10 to as strong as 25 knots north of Utqiagvik, and 30 to 40 knots across the Chukchi coast, anywhere from 8 to 10-foot seas. 40 knots, though, around Point Hope and Cape Lisburne. Winds are going to come up strong, and as you'll see, that surge of wind and higher seas works up toward the northwest coast. Wainwright and Utqiagvik especially, 25 to 30 knots, with 8 to 9-foot seas there lingering around Point Hope to Point Lay. South and easterly winds across the Beaufort will continue. Here's a quick check of your weather again. Light rain and snow showers moving along northern parts of southeast. The big story comes on Thursday. We'll start with the winds across the Bering Strait. As those continue working to the northwest, we've got a winter storm warning and winter weather advisories for as much as 12 inches in parts of the Brooks Range. Watch for rain and snow in northern southeast by Thursday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.